This is my 8th presidential election night, dating back to 1992 when Bill Clinton defeated George H.W. Bush. So this is my 8th one. And what I'm here to tell you is the longer I do this, the more I realize how little I know. I am completely stumped by everything at this point. The Associated Press called the race in Virginia for Joe Biden at 7:37 p.m. And yet, as we look at the latest numbers from the Virginia Department of Elections, as of right now, with 1,942 precincts of 2,585 precincts in, Biden is losing 40% to 57%. That's 270,000 votes. So I've got political expert here, Quentin Kidd, and I'd just like you to maybe weigh in on what in the world you think is going on here.
Yeah, explain that.
I was going to say, the AP is doing, it's a combination of exit polling and modeling. And so that's why they were confident in calling Virginia when they called Virginia. But also let me explain something about where the vote is and where it isn't this year, which is what makes your point about, since 1992, there was a pattern in how we watched votes come in on election night. And this year that pattern is totally different and totally new. Normally, we watch the vote come in that was cast that day. This year, there are twice as many votes cast early in Virginia than were cast on Election Day in Virginia. And so 2,135 of 2,453 precincts have reported in-person voting today's vote. But only 42 of 132 central absentee precincts have reported any of their early vote. And those 132 central absentee precincts are where all of the early vote is going to get put this year. And so we're talking about 3 million votes that are going to get put into these 132 absentee precincts. And that's where the bulk of the votes are going to come this year. And so the answer is, quite frankly, we only know about 37% of the vote right now. A big chunk of it's going to be coming in those absentee precincts.
But so the Associated Press is really taking a leap of faith here, though, aren't they?
They are. Based upon what we know about who voted early, they're assuming it's going to be a Democratic vote that voted early. It's going to be a Republican vote that voted on Election Day, which is why if everyone's watching the returns right now, it looks like Republicans are doing really well. And they are doing really well on Election Day votes. We need to wait until that absentee vote comes in, and we may not get it all tonight. We may get some of it tomorrow. And this is why, everybody should be cautious. The AP clearly wasn't as cautious as I'm thinking everyone should be. But literally, we have about 2 votes absentee for every Election Day vote. And we know the Election Day vote, or we're going to know it before the end of the night. We're not going to know all the absentee vote by the end of the night.
And so I'm thinking if you and I are as somewhat puzzled as we appear to be, Janet, I'm assuming you are too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at these numbers like we are.
Well, I am. And I'm texting with family members, and they're saying, "Oh, yeah, we see that Biden is losing Virginia," and I'm thinking, "Well, no, I think that the AP already called Virginia, and they're telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about." I'm like, hey, I'm the news person. But so, yeah, I've been pretty confused, too, by some of these numbers. But we know that this is a very unusual year with all of the people who voted early. So many people voted early, particularly in Virginia Beach. Think about how long those lines were for several days. And then the lines were not as long today, but just, Virginia had, several weeks of early voting. And it seems like every single day people were standing in line waiting to vote. And then, of course, that all of the votes that were mailed in as well that Quentin has been talking about. But we do know some things about the presidential race. We do know that there have been several states called for Biden and President Trump.
Yeah, that's right. And critically, none of the battleground states, none of the states that really matter. The state, now Virginia's been called already, and again, that's based upon that same AP modeling. But really interesting, just south of us, North Carolina, 77% of the vote in North Carolina, but the AP has not called North Carolina yet. And that's because North Carolina does their vote counting the opposite of the way Virginia does. In North Carolina, they're counting the early absentee votes early and reporting those numbers early, and the Election Day numbers are going to come later. So remember, that early absentee vote favored Democrats. So in North Carolina right now, Joe Biden is leading 51% to 48%. But critically, the election day vote is more likely to be a Republican vote. And so the AP is not calling North Carolina yet because what looks like an early Biden lead might turn into a really tight race or even a Trump lead by the end of the night.
And another state that I'm looking at right now is Texas. If you would have told me a year ago that Texas could possibly be blue, and it may not yet be, but as of this second, it seems to be leaning kind of blue, at 49.6 for Biden to 49.0 to Trump. So it's very, very close.
Right. Texas has not gone Democratic at the presidential level since 1976. It has been trending toward Democrats over the last several years, and Democrats felt really good about it this year. And I should say this: the election day vote in Texas is more accurate. So what we're seeing right now is a more accurate reflection of what happens and is going to happen in Texas, because the rules in Texas about early voting were much more strict than they are in Virginia. So far fewer, as a percentage of total voters, far fewer voters in Texas voted absentee this year, and so more voted on election day. So the results we're seeing right now tell me Texas is going to be a really close race.
And talking about Virginia a little bit more, since we are broadcasting from Virginia, no Republican has carried a statewide victory in Virginia since 2009.
Right.
But who knows what yet could happen tonight based on the numbers at this second, without the absentees and the early votes you're talking about. Virginia could go red.
I
don't think it will.
Unlikely, but yes, it could. And if it doesn't go for Trump or Gade, that's simply another year post 2009. We're talking about a long time drought for Republicans in statewide races, suggesting that Republicans need to rethink their strategy, rethink how they run statewide in Virginia.